Mr. Mudavera and Karen's having some trouble getting back in.
Yes, I'm actually the new link.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colden, can we proceed to the next committee item and wait on Ms. KZW to get back in, and then we can continue with.
We have 4 people right now, Mr. Mudavera.
Pardon me?
Do we have 4 members right now?
Yes.
Okay, I only saw I think 2. If we have a quorum, we can. Well, what I would do is we didn't close out city development and planning. If we have a quorum, how many for city development and planning? How many members do we have right now on?
We have Ms. Karen.
Quorum is 2, and KZW just came in.
Yes. So we're good now.
Okay.
Okay, I'm here. So sorry, I was muted. No one could hear me. So I'll entertain a motion to close city development and planning.
So moved.
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Pat.
We don't have Ms. Porterfield in here.
No, I don't see Ms. Porterfield.
All
Mr.
right, well,
Palmeni and Ms. Patrick are on.
I don't see her. I can try to text her.
we just lost her. Palomini, can we proceed to finance, please? And then we'll get back to public safety.
Call to order to Finance Committee. The item on the agenda is the CARES Act stimulus funding. Ms. Dio.
Good evening, everyone. So in response to the coronavirus pandemic, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has allocated $994,996 through the Emergency Solutions Grant to the city of Schenectady. And this is a request to utilize this funding. And we've opened a public comment period, which started today and will run through Friday. Any comments that we receive, we can definitely distribute to the full council. And we just continue to work with our partners and service providers to identify the most immediate needs for this funding. And you can see what has been outlined in terms of the use of the funding. This is really a community-driven process led by the Homeless Services Planning Board and all of the organizations that deal with emergency shelter. So we are just announcing the 5-day public comment period. We encourage people to submit any comments and asking for the authorization for the utilization of this funding as outlined in the proposal.
Are there any questions?
I'll move it.
Is there a second? I'll second it. All
I
those in
second it.
favor? All those in favor, aye.
Aye,
Have a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Is there a
Okay.
second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi. Mr. Palomini, can you proceed to public service and utility? And if you can please chair that.
Sure. Call to order the Public Service and Utilities. The first item on the agenda is a reminder of a public hearing on February 8th on the redirection of the South Street Church from a two-way street to a one-way street. Mr. Wallen, did you want to comment on this? I don't even think he's on. Just a reminder of the public hearing. I don't believe any actions needed there. The second item is also a reminder of a public hearing on February 8th of redirection of Barrett and Huron Streets between South Avenue to Park Place from a one-way to a two-way street. Are there any comments before I close this? I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Porterfield. Ms. Porterfield, is your audio working?
It is. I'm finally here. I don't know what's happened just now.
Thank you. I would like to call to order the Public Safety Committee. The first item is the 2021 New York State STOP DWI Plan Grant. Assistant Chief Mike Sieber.
Good evening, everyone. This grant is an annual grant we receive through the county, Schenectady County, and disperses out to all the law enforcement agencies. This year, we got a little bit more than last year. It's $20,750. $15,000 of that is actually just for general patrols to proactive enforcement of DWIs, offenders and stuff and such. We have $5,750 is for selective enforcements. Those are usually statewide endorsed stop DWI campaigns. So we bring this to you as important as everything. There's no match for the city. It does goes towards overtime for the officers to work these special details at special times selected throughout the year. So any questions, I'll gladly answer.
Any questions from my colleagues?
No.
Being none, can I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is the benchmark management system. Assistant Chief Mike Sieber again.
We're gonna bring in the heavy hitter. I'm gonna buck this up to the chief. So he's coming.
Back teaming tonight.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I'd like to explain to you, everybody, what this system is it's called Benchmark Management System. It's company's name is Benchmark Analytics. And what it is it's a platform for us to have workforce management and collect data on our workforce that will help us to better manage them. The data that we're inputting into this system is everything from training to use of force, professional standards cases, community engagement, performance evaluations. It creates an officer profile that will allow us to better recognize early warning information on the officers. We have a better idea, how their performance is in the community, both from an activity level and even to a complaint level. It is a solution that we did research on for probably about a couple of years. We first saw this system and went through a review, and then we actually checked out a couple other systems, made some attempts to build our own. Ultimately, we came back to this one as a great option for us, and we're able to get it discounted off the price. It is built within our budget amount of money, and I recommended that the council approve the agreement that we're forming with Benchmark Systems. Questions?
Any questions from my?
Yes, Mr. McGrannon, I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
All right, so Chief, you said the cost annually is $20,000?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So do we have is there the length of this contract? I don't see that here, and maybe I've just overlooked it. Or is this just year by year?
I want to say that the term is 3 years with up to 2 additional 1-year terms.
Okay.
And I have, what they have said is that they do not plan on having any increases during that term, even if we were to add employees, because it's a per employee basis. It does have it in the contract that they can increase it by 4% per year, I believe. But yeah, for the most part, they're assuring that doesn't happen.
All right. And so is this something you're seeking to implement right away, or is this something that you're seeking to include in the packet that we're going to be sending to the governor on April 1st?
This is something that I'd like to start right away, but it is something that we really wanted to get going sooner than later because of some of the conversations we've been having as regards to reforms and reinventions. The longer we wait, the more data we're going to have to put in to have a really good snapshot for 2021. So this will be included in our package for the governor and for the council as something that's a result of our conversations. It really, I think that's fair to say that the conversations made us want it more, so that when asked for certain data, we will be better prepared to provide it in the future than we are currently.
All right. So you'll do it right away, but it'll still be included in the package. That's what I'm hearing, right? All right. Thank you. Those were all my questions.
And
Any other questions from my colleagues?
Mr. Chairman, Chief, I'm correct in excuse me, the final version you negotiated, it'll allow civilian employees also to be included in the record keeping on this, the animal control officers, some of the other support personnel?
That's correct. They included as a part of our negotiations the ability to add civilians into this package, and I had a discussion about even including code enforcement officers into this.
Any other questions? May I have a motion?
I would like to move it. I think it's great.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is discussion, safer street for biking and pedestrian. Ms. Porterfield and Ms. Karen Zaluski, Woolsness. Who will go first?
I can start.
Go ahead.
Proceed.
So, you know, and let me to make from the perspective that I'm looking for, as at it, you know, that for several months now, I've been talking about excessive speeding and ways that we can do that. And as a council, we put money in the budget to, you know, to put a pilot project for speed humps. In early January, I heard from Sun and Cycle Schenectady about their concerns in this particular project that they're working on. And so we've been having conversations about trying to collaborate on the pieces that made sense. So they sent it's not for distribution for everyone, so that's why I haven't sent it out because they asked that they said it was a draft, not for distribution. But they did send a list of things that they thought would be short term versus long term, and there are some things on that list that we could probably incorporate in terms of the speeding issue that we're having. And in addition to that, they sent a list of streets that were, there were 7 neighborhoods that were represented on the list and that were, they considered dangerous. And that was just information they gleaned through Sun and through various meetings that they had. And so in terms of us talking about a pilot project, to me, it just made sense that that would be a place to start since we've already gotten information from those particular neighborhoods. In addition, we, and maybe all of us have received emails regarding other streets that are not necessarily on this list, but have, but people have said, hey, they're speeding too much. So in terms of this particular project, as I said to the organizers who I been speaking with, that it makes sense to me. So let's collaborate in terms of what the city wants to do and what they're interested in. And because there are some commonalities and things that we could get done more quickly. I know that the list that they sent, they also had some long-term goals, which are going to take a little bit longer, but it just made sense to try to work on the short-term goals, especially those where we can see some level of agreement and moving forward. So that's where, in terms of my interactions with them, and hopefully that even as a council, this is something we can get behind and within the entire city, because as we've heard at the rail, there's one particular woman that always used to come to the rail and talk about speeding and talking about pedestrian safety, Joy Hall. So I'm glad we're at this juncture now and that more people are becoming on board. We do need to cast the wet net a little wider in terms of making sure we get more input. Because I've already gotten emails that started talking about this. So so my goal and way I'm looking at this is that we move ahead with our pilot project, incorporating the information from this group about the streets that they said were dangerous. Thank you.
May I ask a question? I just want to ask, so we didn't all get that information, right? I don't think I've seen this report.
No, they sent it and I got it, and I'm assuming Mrs. Luskio-Wazunis got it as well. And they were very clear, said a draft, not for distribution, because they're not there yet. So I agreed that I would not share that because they're, you know, they want to be able to finalize their information and they present it, but they said it was okay to talk about.
Mr. Mudavan?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So I agree, yes, this was in draft form. I'd like to take it a step further. I'd like to take what they've come up with and work with the chief and find out, you know, which ones correlate over with his data and which ones, you know, go with DDAC, and understand if there's intersections that the public think are in need of it, but the chief would have that information based on some of the data that's collected on a regular basis. So I'd like to, and I just got the data on Friday, so I'd like to kind of swing back with the chief and have a good conversation around that. The other thing is, we really need to, and I think we need to do this sooner than later too, is get some legislation going on the dirt bikes and the ATV vehicles that that are raising havoc in the nice weather. I know it's not nice weather right now, but before we know it, the snow will all be gone, and we will be dealing with this again. And I'd like us to get some teeth in our legislation so that we can help to combat some of the issues that we're having with the ATVs and with the motorcycles tearing up the parks and the streets. And it's just unsafe for the community in general. So that is another thing that I want to kind of bring forward and see what we can come up with. I've been looking at other cities and what they've been doing. And I think if we could strengthen the legislation and the fines and maybe confiscate some of these things that aren't registered and, hold them and share the data with the chief and see what we can come up with as far as pilot programs and what the best movement forward would be with that. So, but I agree with Ms. Porterfield. We were asked not to share because it is in draft form, but I would like to kind of share it with the police, the mayor, and figure out what the best way to move forward would be.
Mr. Moody-Baron?
Go ahead, please.
So is Chief Clifford still on the line?
Yes, he is.
Okay, so Chief, I just want to get some clarification. In terms of, does DDAC capture that type of information about traffic? Or would we need, just want to make sure that that's what we need to be doing about that? Because I know that, well, I'll just let you answer that question.
It should. That data should be out there that we could ask Matt, our analyst, to capture for sure.
About traffic patterns and that kind of thing.
Yes, it's just a matter of going to the source to look to find it.
Okay. Okay.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
again, the council has to be cognizant of the fact is the REV demonstration project that we're doing with National Grid and the sensors that are being deployed they're still working it up, but they are going to generate a huge amount of information in terms of traffic flow, traffic speed, timing of it. It's going to be information in a scope and magnitude that we have never had before. So that is another component that is moving forward.
Mayor, thank you for that. Mr. Moody-Baron?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Mayor, thank you for that. Do we have like a timeline on that that we could try to figure out how we could do this all like within a time frame and move forward together? So do we have a timeline on that?
We have some of that on Erie Boulevard today, and it's that they're adding it to other streets, and then to be able to integrate all the information. So you're comparing, and I'm just using this as an example without actually having any data or even being sure that it's there, comparing what's happening on Erie Boulevard, with what's happening on Union Street or on State Street, so that you can see the flow of traffic and some of the issues with it in terms of speed and volume. I use that example of before COVID hit, roughly 30,000 vehicles a day on Erie Boulevard. We never knew it before, but there's roughly 3,000 more vehicles a day that go from a north to south direction than south to north. So those vehicles come into the city and go someplace and go, when they leave, go in another direction. Do they go up Van Vranken Avenue? Do they go out Union Street to Balltown Road? We don't know, but as we get this whole deployment, that we'll be able to better analyze that in terms of some of the traffic enforcement, some of road design, and sequencing of traffic lights to minimize the idling time for cars waiting.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to follow up I hear a lot of feedback that we're talking about Erie Boulevard as a major street, but I want to remind folks that a lot of these comments have come from neighborhood streets, so that may not be a part of that study. So I just want to make sure that we not let that get lost in what we're doing in terms of addressing the excessive speeding. Thank you.
Mr. Motivaren?
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
So, Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, this is going to be ongoing throughout the entire city, correct, with the REV?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think we'll be able to capture that data. And I believe with what the police collect, I think we'll be able to pull this all together, is my assumption. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Are you looking to have this back on the agenda for further discussion, or we are good with this?
No, I'd like to bring it up. I want to do a little more, I want to circle back with the chief and the mayor and determine what's next step. And if we could hold it in another couple of weeks, that would be great. I appreciate it.
No problem. We will have it back on the agenda in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. No problem. The next item is review of the guidelines bylaws for the Civilian Police Review Board with the repeal of 50A. Ms. Porterfield.
Thank you, Mr. Motivaren. At the last meeting, Mr. Motivaren sent a copy of the recommended changes for the CPRB, or a copy of their report to the City Council. And so I guess my first question becomes, is that has everyone had an opportunity to read that? And are you prepared to have some discussion regarding that?
I am.
Okay. All right, so at least there's one person. So we'll start there. So let me just kind of remind folks of what happened. The CPRB sent proposals for changes to the policies and procedures, and they voted on whether or not to do it. And there were some that were very clear that they wanted to make changes on. And so I just wanted to just go over what those things are, because they are part of the legislation. And currently the way our legislation works is that there are certain organizations that send people to be a member of the CPRB. And in the minds of those who are sitting there, they feel like the current procedure is not working that well in order to get quorums. So the vote was that they wanted to do was to keep the current procedure, but to also say that every nominating group would also send a substitute member who would be trained and who could attend the meetings when the primary member could not, so that they could keep their quorum. And the other one which tied for a vote, which would that there be open self-nominations with or without the group support from the City Council, the mayor's office, or a committee, or whoever deemed appropriate to send that person to them. So each of those had tied with 4 votes for the people that were voting. The other thing that they wanted to do was to increase the size of the CPRB from 9 to 19. I know that we had some discussion when we were putting, 9 to 15, that we had some discussion when they were putting that together. So that's another one they said they wanted to do. And this one is probably more to the topic that we're talking about in terms of changes to redaction policies. And they voted the majority to remove redactions to personnel complaints and investigatory source material, excluding complaints in litigation and any other confidential information like informants or undercover officers identification. So they did note that they would like to remove the redaction, but also that CPRB members would be required to sign these non-disclosure agreements and would recuse themselves as needed. So let's see, let me see. And they also wanted to, upon written request, want to make personnel files available, and they wanted the ability to review the investigatory source material, again, to include but not limited to the body-worn cameras. They wanted better training and a new member's handbook to, and a timeline for formal training by the police, to formalize the policy of having a vice chair, because currently they have one, but there's no formal policy that got them there. And these are easy ones, to make sure that the meeting announcements are made routinely in the appropriate media. They want to have a formal annual budget, and to revise the complaint form submission deadline from the current 45-day limit to a 6-month limit. And finally, to formalize their board officer election process, which is something they can do within their bylaws. So that's an overview of what they wanted. I know that everyone got it, but I thought it was important to highlight those that they had were in agreement. There was a majority in agreement that they wanted to move forward with that. And I think that in light of that, we then would look at our current legislation and see how that fits. And then as a council, discuss what works, what doesn't, and how we want to move forward. So I'm not the chair, so that's what I have. Thank you, Mr. Mudabaran.
Thank you. Ms. Patrick, you
Yes, although I'm about to choke. Hold on a second.
take your time.
Sorry, I went down the wrong way there. I have a few comments to make. I went through it pretty thoroughly. I want to start out by saying that I just want to reiterate that again, sorry, that I did want to wait until we had the FIN report before we really went into a lot of detail about the Civilian Police Review Board. But given the fact that the board, sent us forward this document, I did want to comment on some of the things. My first comment is that I'm wondering why it's coming forward at this point, because it's my understanding that we really haven't had too many cases go back to the chief from the Civilian Police Review Board that they pretty much have approved. They haven't had any problems with any of the cases that have been brought to their attention over the last few years. So, and again, they're not here, but I'm just gonna speak this through, and then when we have some of them with us again, we can discuss these in more details. But I was just, for me, it's like, what is their issue with the way that the cases are handled if they haven't brought it forward, for a while? I also really noticed, it sort of jumps out at you that many of these points are not unanimous. And I feel a little uncomfortable about that. I'd like to hear a little bit more about why they weren't able to come to consensus on some of these points. It seems like there's a lack of support among some of the board members for several of these changes. So that was something else that I noticed. And then again, I went through the Chapter 93. I mean, I think we've all been doing that since Ms. Porterfield had first, or at least several of us have been doing that since Ms. Porterfield first drew our attention back to it. And I guess I also want to ask the Civilian Police Review Board what kind of education and outreach they've been doing. I think we're at a critical juncture in the city, in the city, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish with the reforms and the rethinking of what is happening in our police department. And I feel like it's part of the education process, I would hope, is that it would be leading in some way to building trust between the community and the Civilian Police Review Board. And again, these are just my overall comments. I felt that many of the things that they're asking for are almost showing a level of distrust, which again doesn't jive for me with the fact that they really haven't had many problems with approving the cases that have come before them. So those are just my general comments. And I'm sorry, I know this is going to take a bit of time, but I did go through one by one. I think the idea of having the nominating groups designate substitute members is great. I think that's a great way to ensure that there's quorum. I think that then contradicts having increasing the size of the police review board, because I think that there's really not a need to do that. I'm a fan in anything that I am part of to not have more people than you need, because it tends to make it very difficult to conduct business. But I think if we have the substitute members, then that kind of hits at the issue of everybody not being able to show up. So I would go with 1B, but I would not go with 1D of increasing the size. And then I absolutely do not think that we should be having self-nominations. I think the idea of having the nominating groups is good, but I think that unless, I mean, I think there would have to be background checks. I think that if there were people that were recently released from jail, they might be holding grudges against the people that were the arresting officers. I'm just not crazy about the idea of having people self-nominate. So that, and I noticed that that's one that was a split vote as well. So I'd want to hear more about that from the group. Getting into number 2, again, I do not support the changes to the redaction policies. I think we need further discussion on these things. I want to know why the members who voted for 2A and 2B, why do they feel that this information why do they need that kind of background information to do what they are supposed to be doing according to the legislation? And I also think that if they needed it that badly, they could foil it. So I would not be in favor of 2A or to 2B. I think that, again, I just don't think that that kind of specific background information is necessary for them to complete their role in terms of trying to determine whether the police chief and if they've had a fair and impartial review of the complaint. And again, I also think that that would be, you know, I just don't think that that one is necessary. I know that just from understanding the history, I certainly wasn't a part of council, but there certainly have been officers, almost a couple of dozen officers that were dismissed by the chief during his time as the chief. So to me, it seems like he's doing a pretty good job of holding his officers accountable. And given the fact that the review board hasn't really ever questioned his decisions, I want to talk to them a little bit more on why now are they not trusting those decisions. I definitely support the onboarding thing and the, I'm on number 3 now. I think the idea of having the, you know, for the CPRB to be working with the police department on training, I think is awesome. You know, I don't know if they've reached out already to the department for assistance with training, but I think there's a lot of expertise within the department, and that would be, I mean, they definitely should be getting training like that as they join the board and ongoing, especially as the issues change. I mean, I can see now that, you know, issues related to the reform, issues related to bias, you know, some of those things are pretty important topics, and I think those topics will change over time. So I think that connection between the police department and the review board is really important. I mean, you know, formalizing the vice chair, doing the meeting announcements, formalizing the board officer election process. I think those are, you know, fine, no-brainer kinds of things. I think the procedure for the annual budget is something that we all are going to have to talk about when it comes time for budget, because I'm not really sure that we'll have the money for that. But again, I don't know how that plays out in terms of CDBG money or any of those other kinds of things. So I'm sure that'll be something that comes up more when we're talking about police reform. And then the last one, my last comment, I should say, number 7, the limit, the 45-day, it's revised complaint form submission deadline from the current 45-day limit to a 6-month limit. Again, the majority voted in favor of that, but again, I'm just not sure what would justify 6 months. I think 45 days is completely sufficient, and I'd want to ask the Civilian Police Review Board why they feel the longer time period is necessary. So those are my comments on that. I spent a lot of time on that this weekend and the last since we got it. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments or if it has been able to spend time. I'm sure we're going to be discussing it again, and hopefully with some of them present as well.
Mr. Mudavar?
Go ahead, please.
So, so thank you, Ms. Patrick, because I'm pretty much in agreement with just about everything you've said. I think everything that you said, I probably agree. A couple of the highlights I definitely agree with, you know, there's a lot of not consensus and split votes. And I would want to have more consensus and have like why are we moving forward with some of these changes when I don't feel that there's really a need, you know, especially seeing as, you know, the chief has been doing a great job, and I don't see there's much disagreement here. I think with the expansion of the board, if there are going to be designated substitute members, I really don't feel that it's necessary to expand the board. As you said, it's more difficult to get things done when you have more people. You know, I think it's at a good number right now, and understand why we would need to do that. I don't support the redaction policy. And I think that they can make some of their, you know, formalizing their bylaws so that they can have a vice chair, which I think would be, you know, totally acceptable. And just in general, I questioned the same reasons that you do. Why are we doing this now? So I think the board functions in a great manner. I think they do a great job. But I would be, I would not be supportive of some of these changes just because there's not enough consensus, and you know, the redaction policies I don't support. So in general, I agree with the majority of what Ms. Patrick said, and you know, appreciate her words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mudavera?
Go ahead, Ms.
All
Porterfield.
right, I didn't know if anyone else wanted to comment, because I do have a couple of things that I want to say in terms of, well, first of all, why now? I think that's, to me, that's pretty clear. We're in this time where we have the governor's executive order where we're talking about police reform. And even though it's not in there, if you review the manual that was also sent along with that, it talks about the various things that apply to police reform, and a citizen oversight board is one of those things. And since we have one, it just makes sense for us to do this while we're doing this reform process. I don't know why we would wait, and you know, it's there. It's right on page, I don't know, 65 or something. So that's something that's already included in that says, hey, if you have this, maybe you want to look at that. So that's, to me, that's why now we're doing this. Let's just do it in its entirety and look at the whole big picture, as opposed to waiting till we get everything formalized, we submit it, and then we're like, oh, let's go back and look at Chapter 93 and the CPRB, when it's something that just really goes hand in hand with police reform, because our CPRB is part of our policing in the city of Schenectady. It doesn't mean that every city may not have one, but we do. So that to me makes sense as to why now. In terms of whether they're doing a good job or not doing a good job, for me, that doesn't really, that doesn't come into question. And I really think it's important that we don't try to characterize this as an indictment against the police department, because sometimes I think it's coming across like that, or some level of mistrust against the chief. That is not, in my mind, what's going on. It's simply, this is a time with what's going on all over the country, and this is something that's going all over New York State, that we're just taking a look at it. So it's not an indictment against Chief Eric Clifford or the job that he's doing, or the Schenectady Police Department. It's simply taking a look. And if we're really, really, really comfortable that everything is fine, I'm not sure why the opposition to taking a look. And in terms of consensus, you know, we as a council only require 4 of 7 votes. So I'm not sure why we feel like a body that we've convened has to be absolutely unanimous. It's like anything else. You get the majority of people agree. If you ever get a whole body of people that agree 100% on something, I'm thinking somebody's really not giving input, or they're just like folding and saying, I'll do whatever. So I don't think you're ever, not ever, sometimes, because some of their votes were unanimous, that everything doesn't have to be unanimous. But if we operate under the majority voting it through, then why would we have something different for this body? Why would the rules be different for them than we even apply to ourselves? And in terms of 50A, that is the whole purpose of 50A, to change the redaction in these documents. And so maybe we want to delve a little deeper into that. So that's, I guess, really, there's nothing more I could say. I don't want to elaborate any further. That is one of the purposes of 50A. So we need to look a little bit further into 50A and say, does it make sense for these redactions that are required? Which is another reason this is also coming up, is because of the repeal of 50A. It's another reason that's being discussed now. So those things, and to say that that in order to get it, we should get foiled, a board that we ask to convene of volunteers, that in order to give them information to adequately do what we've asked them to do, to ask them to foil that. I think that's really pretty unfair. And I wonder if there's other boards who need information, not necessarily information from the police, but need information, or also say, if you want it, then foil it, because we all know that the foiling process takes a pretty decent amount of time. So I want to thank both Ms. Patrick and for Ms. Zaluski-Walzunas for taking the time to take a look at this and giving their input. And I do agree that maybe we should go back to meeting with the CPRB and maybe just, kind of talk it through with them. But however, I don't think we need to put them in the position that you have to be unanimous before you bring this to us, because it's not how any other board within the city operates. It's not required. And so it should not be required of this board either. Thank you.
Mr. Motivaran?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, there's, I think, some very good questions been raised tonight, and would really like to see the Civilian Police Review Board, maybe in writing, respond to the answers, to the questions with their answers to the various questions that have been raised. Considering there's significant, not universal agreement on a lot of these issues. I personally would rather have a written answer, so we're not playing out what should happen in their particular committee meeting in public, or not in public, but in one of our meetings. That's for them to work out. I would like a written report, and I would also tend to agree on a couple of these items. Raising the board numbers from 9 to 15 doesn't make any sense to me, with the designating of a member, which I think is a good way to go about it. But also, in the past, we've had considerable issues getting a number of people to actually show up to the meetings. So when you have more, you have even less chance of getting people to participate, I think, a lot of times. But that's, I guess, to be seen. I would also agree with the redaction thing. To me, that's information they don't necessarily need to do the task of the CPRB, and it's not something I'm supportive of. Some of these items, they can hope, I'm not sure why they haven't been done already, but they make sense that they should be done, and would encourage the board, particularly for the vice chair questions number 4 and 5, to actually move on those as a board themselves. And as was already said about the budget, a lot depends on what the requests are, where the city finances are, and a number of issues along those ways. But I personally would like a written response if we're going to get something, which I'm assuming we will. That way we can look at it and chew over it, and not have a CPRB meeting kind of play out in one of our meetings, as I think that's just more efficient, and we can get more done that way.
Mr. President?
Go ahead, Ms. Patrick.
I just want to, I appreciate what Ms. Porterfield had to say. I guess it's my perception, I'll just say it that way, that my reading and my perception of this, the way that it's presented to us, to me, seems like it's promoting a mistrust. So that's what I meant. I think that the writing itself is kind of making me feel, so that's just my perception. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm not saying that they don't trust, but I'm just saying that that's the way that this seems to come across to me. I get it about the not being able to come to consensus, and certainly, Ms. Porterfield's completely right about that. But I just think that some of these topics in this report are important enough that I want to hear more back from the folks about why they disagree, why they couldn't come to agreement. And I think that was pretty clear too in the meeting that we had with them as a council, where there just seemed to be a lot of disagreement. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about
Like
that. And
us.
the reason, yeah, a lot of groups. And I think the other thing was just in terms of asking why now, I guess I was coming more from the standpoint, as I said, of, that whole, if it's not broken, is that the right expression? If it's not broken, why fix
Don't
it?
fix it.
Because they seem to not have had too much issue with their role is to see if fair and impartial reviews have happened, and I don't think they've really sent much back. So it seems to me that they haven't really been having issues. So those are just my questions for them. But that's where I was coming from. And I hear what you're saying about the FOIL Act. I was just, to me, I just don't think that they need all the background information that they're asking for. So, but I hear what you're saying about the FOIL taking a long time. So
Mr.
that's-
Mudavaren? Oh, thank you. Mr. Mudavaren?
Go ahead, please.
So, if folks feel like we need to, meet with the CPRB again, I'm not suggesting that they do this as part of our committee meeting. However, we could do it as was done before under public safety. And I just want to make sure that, it keeps being said like there's a tie. There were no ties. They were by one vote that it was, people were in favor of it, which is what happens. All you need is a simple majority. So let's just be clear that it's not that the people were tied like it's 3-3, because that was not what happened. It was one more than, it was one more than the other, but it was enough to say, this is how we would want it. So again, this is what we agree, what we do with every other board on most things, a simple majority. So I'm not sure why we question it when it comes to this board. As was said, they had some disagreement. We have disagreements. Boards have disagreements. But then, whatever gets voted through is what gets voted through. So let's make sure that we're applying this uniformly and not saying, well, with this particular board, let's question that a little bit more. I keep hating to keep bringing it back, but the why now is because there's an executive order 203, and we're looking at police reform. So maybe they didn't have any issues before, but this is an opportunity to look at everything. And that's all this is. Let's just look at everything. And that, again, in the manual that was sent by the governor's office, which we all have, says, if you have that, maybe you should take a look at it. So that, to me, it just makes sense that we're taking a look at it for no other reason than that. And, let's just do it and see what comes out of it. But not to think, again, that this is an indictment against the police department, because it's not. It's simple us taking a look of what are our procedures? Do they work? Do they work for our citizens? Can we improve upon it? Or is it good as it is? Taking a look. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mudavaren.
Go ahead, please.
I just said thank you.
Is there any other comment?
Yeah, Mr. Mudavaren.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't think, I won't speak for everybody, but I don't think there's any issue with anybody saying anything about reviewing. I think everybody here agrees with that. I think the issues are more focused on, let's get the CPRB to focus on what their powers are and getting those things accomplished, such as the outreach and education piece. I look at it as an extension of working with the police, and also holding the police accountable to some extent where their powers are. So I would like to see that the board focus on that piece. And then, as I said, I would rather have a written response. That way it gives us more chance to digest what they're actually talking about than sitting through a meeting where there's differing opinions and it's hard to tell what the consensus of the board is. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that and say, having a written report does not mean there's a consensus either. So I frankly would like to see us meet with them again and have people give their input right then and right there. And just having a written report, it could be just a few people and not the entire group. And just for the record, we recently lost a member of the CPRB. So now we're down, that board is down one member. So, you know, I think that it's worthwhile having a discussion.
So
Thank
Mr.
you.
Shave, Mr. Shave,
No, it wasn't Mr. Shave.
who's no longer a part of the board?
I'm not sure if that's something that the mayor wants to share with you,
Okay,
but I just know that
sorry.
one member dropped off.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
I'm not aware of somebody dropping off.
Oh, well, I was told that that a member has left that board. So and a letter or an email was sent to your office. So before I disclose that, then I'll let you you know, check into that. But
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm sensing a feeling that there are a lot of questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reach out to both the chair and vice chair for this board and ask them for some response. And I think that we should invite them back to a public safety committee meeting. So I'm going to reach out and make these suggestions to them, and I will get back to the entire council and to engage them and to answer these questions that was raised this evening. Any other comment on this item? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Jaren. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Um,
One more.
Government operations.
yeah. I'd like to call to order government operations.
Oh, I'm on that one.
Hello? Yes? All right.
Go ahead, Porterfield.
There's one item on the agenda, and that is a ceremonial resolution for Black History Month. I think everyone knows today is the first day of Black History Month. And so even though we're doing this all virtually, I certainly would not want this month to pass without us recognizing it and doing a ceremonial resolution. So that is what I would like to put forward. Does anyone have any questions?
No, good
I'll entertain a
idea.
motion. I beg your pardon?
I said, great idea.
Yeah, I totally support it. So I'll move it.
All right, I will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Is there anything else to come before government operations? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good
Thank you.
evening. Thank you.
Aye.